Have we started the recording? Yes, we have. And will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing it either from the Council Chamber, Civic Officers, Angel Street, Bridge End, or from remote locations. Should I, as Chair, experience any technical difficulties during the meeting, Councillor Alan Wattham will step in and take over temporarily as the Chair in my absence. And in absence of Councillor Wattham, then Councillor Ross Penhale-Thomas will step in. Please can everyone ensure that mobile phones are switched off or switched to silent mode, please? Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and I will ask the officer to present the brief summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Officers and members are reminded to refer to the page numbers contained in the public version of the agenda report pack. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their microphones on at that point. But I would ask, with the exception of myself, as chairperson, at all other times, please keep your microphones switched off, as it will help to minimise any background noise and interference. However, I would invite members and officers to leave their cameras on for the duration of the meeting, as agreed at the recent full council meeting. Whether attending in person, in the chamber or remotely, if any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window. I will come to you in order that I receive the request. If you're in the chamber, please switch on the microphone on your desk and speak directly into the mic, and allow those who are remote to hear you clearly. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The instant messaging chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout this duration, and where necessary, will mute those that are not being used. I will ask officers to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to the agenda. Bear with me. Apologies for absence. I will now ask the Scrutiny Officer to announce the apologies for absences received.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from the leader, Councillor Hugh David, and Councillor Howell Williams, and Laura Kinsey as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely. Declarations of interest. If any member has an interest to declare in any member on the agenda, please click the raised hand icon, and I will come to you in turn for you to declare an interest. Maxine, did you want to declare an interest? Hello. Sorry, you're on
Yeah,
mute.
I was just looking for the hand, that's all. Yeah, this the community centre one, which is sorry. SSW 12 on page 62.
Yep.
Thank
Lovely.
you.
Thank you. Did you want to declare a personal or prejudicial?
Personal, please.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Anyone else? No, lovely. Moving on. Approval
Yes.
of minutes. Oh,
sorry to interrupt you, Chair. The hand
sorry,
is not working.
oh, there we
working.
go.
It's come down.
Costumes.
Yeah. I have to declare an interest, as you mentioned, the Terrorism Act, and its personal interest, as my daughter works in counter-terrorism. Thank you.
No problem. That's fine. That's lovely. Grand. Thank you very much. Item 3, approval of minutes. Please can I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes? Firstly, for the 23rd of November 2023.
I'll move.
Chair.
Thank you. Move and second with Ross. Yep. So Maxine move,
Yep.
Ross second. And again for the 6th of December.
I'll move again, Chair.
Second.
Seconded, Chair.
Alan, lovely. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Moving on, item 4, mid-term financial strategy 2024-25 to 27-28. I will ask the Chief Officer performance change. Sorry, pardon me. I will ask the Chief Officer Finance, Performance and Change. That's quite a mouthful, sorry. To briefly present the report. I will then call upon members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking on the raised hand icon in turn. Thank you.
Chair, can I jump in a second? Sorry, my battery died just as I was trying to give a declaration of interest earlier. I plugged it back in now. It's the same one as Mel, Max, sorry, the community centre one. I'm a director in Caerdydd Development Trust, which gets a small grant from BCBC, I believe, annually. So it's the same item as that, right? No
problem. Do you want to go personal or prejudicial?
I'll prejudicial. I won't take part in that at all.
No worries.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Right. Sorry. Moving on.
Thank you, Chair. For the sake of the recording, I'm Carys Lord. I'm the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. I'll just very quickly give you an overview of the report and concentrate on the issues that are particularly relevant for this committee, if that's all right, Chair. So the report's before you today to present to you the draft medium-term financial strategy for the period 2024-2025 through to 2027-2028. And it includes a financial forecast for the whole of that period, together with a detailed draft revenue budget for the coming financial year. So Cabinet has received budget monitoring reports this year outlining the in-year financial pressures which have been brought about by increased demand for services and the impact of the cost of living crisis on both pay and prices. The level of in-year pressures this year is unprecedented. So it is a very challenging financial context for the budget planning process for the coming financial year, with many uncertainties and far more challenges than we would usually have. The result of that is that the level of service and budget cuts that need to be made for next year are significant. From paragraph 3.1.2 of your report, the current financial situation is outlined, together with the ongoing pressures that the Council will be required to meet in the coming years. There are some external pressures that the Council faces which will put pressure on the available resources, and they include legislative change, much of which is not fully funded by Welsh Government, increased demand for services, in particular for this particular service area, and demographic changes within our population, with our population increasing and people living longer. Due to the number of the unavoidable pressures which we are facing, it's not possible to balance the budget without also making consequential changes to the level of services that we can provide and prioritising those services that are deemed most important in terms of meeting the Council's priorities. The report does go into particular issues for each service area in the Council. In relation to social care and wellbeing, the Council is proposing a budget of 105 million in the coming financial year for this service area. And there are also pressures included within that budget for this service due to the increase in demand and the complexity of care that people require. Just very quickly on the future context, we had our draft settlement in 20th of December last year. The final settlement will not be announced until late in February. Therefore, the financial strategy and the budget for next year are proposed on the basis of that provisional settlement. The headline figure in that settlement was an increase overall of 3.1% across Wales, and for Bridgend, an increase of 3% on our Welsh Government funding, and this equates to £7.79 million additional funding for the Council. When we look at the longer term issues, the medium-term financial strategy assumes a 9.5% increase in council tax for the coming financial year, and then going forward an assumed annual increase of 4.5% for the remainder of the strategy period. Based on that data available, the likely scenario is that savings totaling 34.3 million will need to be found during the lifetime of this strategy. The draft revenue budget for next year is shown for you in Table 5 of this morning's report. Overall, the draft budget is proposing cost pressures of £11.8 million being funded in next year, and these are seen, you can see these in detail at Appendix A. In relation to this particular service, the proposed cost pressures for this budget is 8.8 million for next year. We've also had to identify budget reduction proposals of £16 million across the authority in order to be able to prepare a draft budget. and these are detailed for you again at Appendix B to this report. It's been extremely difficult to identify these reductions in service budgets for the budget, and it has required some difficult decisions and proposed cuts to a number of services. The proposed reductions for social services and wellbeing are £2.3 million, and as I said, you can see those detailed in Appendix B. And the draft budget you have before you this morning is based on an increased or a proposed increase of council tax of 9.5%. So, Chair, if I could just take you to recommendations at section 9 of today's report.
Thank you, Caris, and thank you for coming in to all of our invitees. I do appreciate this is a very difficult budget to set this year. I know that we've got pressures of 8.36 million on this budget and indicative reductions of 252.323 million, which is a significant sum. So it is going to be a very difficult budget, and I do appreciate that. I appreciate you coming in to answer these questions, because I know that the committee do have questions, unfortunately virtually on every line of your budget, but I'm sure you welcome the scrutiny. It's an important part of the process. So with that in mind, let's crack on. So my first question from members, I've got Councillor Ross Penhale-Thomas who wants to come in.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody. This feels a little bit like a Groundhog Day and deja vu, having been through the BREP process, having watched Cabinet on Tuesday, having watched little bits and pieces of SOC 1 and COSC this week as well. So we're almost there. We're making good progress. But yeah, thanks, Chair. Just referring specifically as an overarching question, really, on the budget reduction proposals across the Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate. Can I ask the Director and Cabinet Member to give an assessment of if these budget proposals are to be supported at next month's budget, how they would assess we are able to continue with our statutory duties? How well do they believe we will fulfil our statutory duties in the next financial year? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Cabinet Member.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Thomas. I believe we will fulfil all our statutory duties. Our teams are working really hard out there. You're already aware that we've a sustainability plan in children's that is reducing our child protection figures. Our teams are working really well. We are reducing the agency spends that all council are aware of, that you all supported because of the difficulties that we had following inspection. Our older people's team are working really well. I'm going to look back at Jackie and say I'm assuming that we're still in the same position, that we've got nobody in our hospitals waiting for assessment currently. And I think that's yeah, right, see, there we are. So that was at the beginning of the week. It can change daily, as you can see. I think we're doing exceptionally well. I appreciate the budget pressures in social services, but the demand, as you've already seen throughout scrutiny this week, has been significant. We need to cope with that demand, but I am quite confident that we will discharge our statutory functions. Does that answer your question, Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, great. But thanks for opening with that, Councillor Gabby. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, do you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, just because Councillor Penhale-Thomas asked for the Cabinet Member and the Director to comment on the question. So, you know, as your Statutory Director of Social Services, one of my roles is to advise on the resources required to meet statutory duties under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act and the plethora of other legislation. So we know and acknowledge this is an incredibly challenging budget for the Council. We've been very clear and worked very closely with Caris and the team in terms of the resources required to meet those statutory duties, and the 3-year sustainability plan for children's social care, which Cabinet and then Council approved following scrutiny in September, is a good example of that in terms of setting out the requirements from a workforce perspective particularly. There is an area of challenge in this budget, in that one of the probably most significant overspend for the Council at the moment relates to care experienced children and to the placement costs of those care experienced children, and there's not a budget pressure which is proposed to be funded in relation to that area. So that presents a challenge to us corporately. In terms of adult social care, as Councillor Gebbia said, we're working very diligently to meet all our statutory duties within the resource envelope that we've got. You can see through this year's budget monitoring that has been incredibly challenging, and we've got a number of areas of overspend which are reflected in the budget pressures, but also require, whilst not cashable savings, require significant reductions in the spend in those areas. So learning disabilities is one of those such areas, and obviously you scrutinised the transformation plan for learning disabilities in a recent scrutiny meeting. The other area is older adults. So in order to live within the budget, even an uplifted budget, we do have to look at how we practice and still meet our statutory duties by supporting and enabling people to be as independent as possible. So I think it's going to be very challenging to meet all statutory duties within the budget, but the one area I would highlight as a particular risk is around children's placements going into next financial year.
Thank you. Can I just say though, having scrutinised this committee for 2 years, I am well aware that our social services teams are really moving forward on implementing changes, looking at challenges, finding ways to overcome those challenges, and do it in a way that is fresh and, you know, quite invigorating really. And others, we're setting the benchmark, and that's something to really be praiseworthy about, because that is difficult to do that in a time of austerity that we've got at the moment. So, and when budgets are short, I think that our social services department is doing exceptionally well with what we've got as well. So I just want to note that as well. Councillor Gebbie.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for your kind words. I think what I need to represent to the committee is one of the I went to the Senedd yesterday to give evidence, as I'm sure you're all aware. One of the things that I've highlighted with them is the increasing ageing population that we have and the demand on our older population services. I also represented the views around their not-for-profit, which I agree with, but by the same token, they need to fund that. I was very clear with Welsh Government. I have no problems with their policy direction. The problem that I have is that they are not funding these policies. So I was very clear in Evidence Committee yesterday in the Senedd, because I'm sure that that's one of the questions that your committee will have for me this morning is, what am I doing about that? I am representing those views extremely robustly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I'm glad that you've raised that, actually, because I know in a number of meetings we've heard about the fact that Westminster isn't funding the Senedd properly. However, one of my residents has raised to me the fact that actually we've had quite significant sums of money come through from Westminster to the Senedd that have, in his words, been blown on projects. So 120 million on Bringlass tunnels and millions here, tens of millions here, etc., etc. So I think perhaps there's a conversation to be had going back to the Senedd and to the ruling authority there, that actually, if we stop spending money on folly projects that come into the country from Westminster, then there would be more money to come down to our local authorities. And I think that's where the importance of this is. We need to see that money coming through the Senedd when it comes to the Senedd as well, because we can't be strangled at local authorities. And I know that you are in those committees and you are standing up for our local authorities, Councillor Gebbie. So thank you for that. Councillor Penhale-Thomas, can I bring you in?
Yeah, that's lovely. Thanks, Chair. And thanks to the Director and the Cabinet Member for their clarity and confidence in assessing that we'll be able to carry out our statutory duties. That is a welcome response, given the impact of the cuts and the breadth of them, not just in this department, but across the council. And I think it's a conversation we've had in many committee meetings and will continue to have through the duration of the medium-term financial strategy around whether we gold plate, silver plate, bronze plate certain services. So can I have an assessment, please, just as a supplementary to this? Is there or are there parts of the Budget and Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate whereby there is a feeling that we are going well above our statutory duties in terms of whether we're gold plating or silver plating services? Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Gebbie?
Another topic I raised with Welsh Government yesterday is we know that early intervention and prevention is always more cost effective for our young people and has better outcomes than waiting until they come into statutory services. We are not funded to deliver those services, but actually that's where our best spend is. So I've informed Welsh Government, and I'm sure you can all look at the recording should you wish to do so, but I've been very clear with them. And one of the comments that I made in the Senedd yesterday was every public service in Wales has increased their workforce since the austerity began. Local government has reduced its workforce as a whole across Wales by 40%. That has a significant impact on the delivery of the services, and we're delivering those on behalf of Welsh Government. So they need to fund those provisions. I've also told them to stop funding things for 3 years as a pilot project that actually returns really, really good results, but we have no revenue funding to support that project going forward. So I hope that's clearer for you. I think what I would also say is that the pressure is on children's and placements, and we are not receiving the capital spend to design and develop our own provisions. And how, you know, when we look at housing has a massive implication on social services. If we haven't got enough proper housing for our residents out there, the impact on social services and the support that they need around that then, because their health deteriorates. There are so many further issues. We have problems getting children to schools. If you're placing somebody up in my stag that's come from Porthcawl and they've been declared homeless, how are they getting their children to school? You know, there's so many impacts. There's no support network. We need to try and keep people where they live and work and where their support networks are. That has a decreasing impact on our provision of services because they have their own support around them rather than relying on statutory provision. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. And I have to admit, I'm quite sad. I did watch your thing in the Senedd from yesterday. I watched it back. No, and I genuinely thought that you went into bat quite well there. So thank you for that. It's a tough one to do. So you did well. Thank you. Claire, can I bring you in?
Yeah, just to try and answer Councillor Pennell Thomas's questions about gold, silver, bronze standards of service, and hopefully to provide assurance. What we actually have in Bridgend is very cost-effective services. We've done benchmarking with other parts of Wales. So in terms of older person services, we're in the lowest possible quartile in terms of spend on older person services. But I would say you get very good outcomes for that spend because there's been a lot of innovation over the years, particularly around integrated services. So by working together with health colleagues, you get better outcomes by working in a joint up way there. Jackie may come in at some point, either now or later in the committee, to tell you about how the level of scrutiny there is in terms of the levels of care and support that individuals receive from care plans. And that's all about making sure that we're not over supporting people. We've had this scrutiny, haven't we, around learning disabilities in this committee, and we've talked about the fact that as a consequence of the pandemic, where there was less access to community resources and support for obvious reasons, that we did fall into providing more commissioned support for individuals, and that's where the Learning Disability Transformation Programme is coming into effect. We're about an average spender on learning disabilities when we compare ourselves with the rest of Wales, not high, but not the lowest. And so we're doing work to bring ourselves back to where we were previously, where we were a lower spend and had better community connection. In terms of children's social care, we certainly haven't been gold-plated over the years in terms of that. And what that's led to is perhaps higher caseloads than we would want, and more children being supported in that more intensive way by becoming care experienced. So the push through investing in early intervention and prevention in a very targeted way and getting the caseloads of our workforce right is about getting practice better and supporting more children to stay at home with their families rather than coming into the care system. So certainly not gold plated, trying to be proportionate and safe at all times, and ultimately support people to live their lives preferably without intervention from social services, and that's the aim. The risk is if you cut back on workforce, for example, that actually you'll spend a lot more money as a council because more children will then come into care because we'll be back into that crisis management which we've worked so hard to move away from. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is that sufficient for you, Councillor Penhill-Thomas?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Chair. Points very well made, and in particular, I heard loud and clear with regards to grant funding. Thanks.
Thank you. Right, if everyone's content, we will move on to budget pressures and Appendix A on page 51, please. Now, I'm going to take us through as per SSW 1, 2, 3, etc., because I have a number of questions from members going forward. So the first question that I've got is on SSW 1 on the budget pressures on Appendix A, and that is from Councillor Eugene Kaparos, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I see that you want to reduce the mileage budget. I know this may, just be one example, but I have seen an example where people in care are being taken on particularly long trips on an ad hoc basis, sometimes 120-mile round trip to pick up takeaways. I'd like to know what sort of oversight is going to be put in place to ensure we don't have unnecessary journeys like that. Personally, I think it would be better if people were supported in the local community, but also if we are doing trips like that ad hoc, then it puts an unnecessary stress on staff and perhaps even a need to increase staffing in some circumstances. So what sort of managerial oversight or pre-planning of such trips is going to be put in place in future?
Thank you. Whilst it's anecdotal, I'm going to allow the question, but who would like to answer the crux of the question which came through there? Thank you.
I'm very aware of this circumstance. Thank you very much, Councillor Kaparos. And I would tell you that it is indeed been managed and resolved. I cannot put it any plainer than that, and for obvious reasons you will appreciate I won't go into further details. That is not acceptable, and whatever is going on in children's services in their children's social care plan, it needs to be appropriate and it needs to be proportionate, and some trips are not proportionate, and it has been addressed at a senior level and will be working down.
Thank you. I think the main tenet of that question is how is it being managed, though, as well, please, if possible, you could explain.
It's been managed through supervision and an action plan, Chair.
Thank you. Claire?
Yeah, I don't actually know that individual circumstance. I won't comment it, but perhaps Jackie and Dave can come in and talk about management oversight in adults and children's.
Please, who would like to go first? Ladies first?
Yeah.
Right. Jackie, I'll bring you in.
Sorry. We can't hear, Chair.
Is your mic working? Oh. Do you want to move over? Sorry, everyone. Do you want to just move over one seat, and then the mic isn't working on that one? If you bear with us 2 seconds. I tell you what, whilst you move, I'll come back to you. Right, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And for the record, David Wright, Deputy Head of Children's Social Care. In terms of oversight of long journeys, I guess it is kind of the question that has been posed. In particular, we'll never get away from some of those long journeys because of where our children are placed, in particular those children who are in the care system. However, we will always look at that from a management perspective as to whether that needs to be undertaken through a mileage and through travel mileage or through other routes, whether that's trains or whether that's through car hire, etc., etc. In particular, scrutiny around budget has been obviously raised because of the pressures that we are facing to the point now where even our senior management team, our group managers have to have oversight and sign off in terms of any expenditure, even to the points around credit card kind of spend as well. So the management oversight that is now in place around some of these decisions is much more increased than it was maybe in years gone by. I think it's fair to say, as I've already alluded to, we'll never move away from some of those long journeys because of where our children are and obviously the statutory roles that we have and the responsibilities we have in terms of seeing those children as well. In essence, it's a point around us ensuring that when we are visiting those children, they're done in the most cost-effective ways as well. And our senior managers and our team managers are very much cited in that in line with how Councillor Gebby referred to, through supervision, through care planning, and through ongoing support as well. I hope that covers it.
Thank you. Jackie, I'll come back to you.
Okay, is that working now? Yeah, okay, thank you. So a couple of things. So some of the things that Dave described are very similar. So in terms of us monitoring, extended journeys, and that is done at a very senior level now at group manager and above. In terms of that, in adult services is slightly different, because what we've got in our direct care services is that we've got a number of individuals that have got mobility cars, and that they use their own vehicle and their own expenses to make journeys, and that's all about choice, and that's all part of a care plan and a bigger picture. Some of the savings part of this is around reducing staff mileage overall. So we have seen a reduction in the number that are spend generally on mileage, and that's what this is linked to. Obviously, our finance colleagues will be able to give you some further detail on that. All I can say really is that, transport is a significant issue, isn't it, for people moving around the borough, and we're trying lots of cost-effective ways of us managing that. We've got a specific piece of work that's going on at the moment about people moving around in the daytime really, and how we do that, and how we can do that more cost-effectively. So there's a targeted piece of work that's come on the back of the Learning Disability Transformation Plan that we talked about very recently. So all of those things together, really.
Thank you. Does that satisfy your question, Councillor Kaparos?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Moving on to SSW2, and I believe, Della, you had a question on this, please.
Yeah, I'm going back to the budget pressures now, I think, not the report that Councillor Kaparos was on. Okay. So on SSW2, we're talking about the budget pressure outlined in reports in September 23, and it says the funding is required to strengthen the council's statutory safeguarding accountabilities. So I just want clarification, and that we're strengthening the council's statutory responsibility. So we go in above and beyond then. So just a little bit of explanation about that, and then what the 2.5 million then it will be spent on. Thank you.
Who would like to take, Claire?
Yeah, perhaps the wording is slightly misleading there. This is so that the council can meet its statutory safeguarding responsibilities. So members will be aware that 2 years ago, almost to the day, we moved as a council into a critical incident in children's social care because we were struggling to meet our statutory responsibilities to safeguard and protect children. At the core of that critical incident was the fact that we didn't have sufficient workforce in our front door, in our MASH IAA services, and in our safeguarding localities to safeguard children. Caseloads were unacceptably high. We were inspected shortly after that. Critical incident was declared in May 2021. 22 it was. Get me years muddled. In May 2022. And CIW, Care Inspectorate Wales, declared their serious concerns in respect of children's services in Bridgend as a consequence of that inspection. And myself and the Chief Executive, who's on the call today, met with the Deputy Chief Inspector and received formal correspondence to say that they required the Council to make rapid and sustained improvements. So we made rapid improvements. The way that we made rapid improvements was by deploying considerable additional resource so that caseloads could be at a safe and acceptable level, not a gold standard level. So if I compare our caseloads to a neighbouring authority, they are higher than that neighbouring authority, but they are safe and acceptable. But we could only do that by deploying over and above our funded establishment. So that was a real challenge to us. We knew that in order to meet all of the sort of ongoing safeguarding requirements, and this is about basic safeguarding, not a gold or silver standard safeguarding, that we needed to do further analysis, and that we did, informed not just by a commissioned expert in the field, but also by engaging an independent advisor to make sure that we were getting this right. in terms of the resource that we required. That came together in terms of a report, which is the 3-year sustainability plan, which you scrutinised as a committee, which Cabinet and Council then agreed in September last year. And as a consequence of that analysis, it said in order to be safe moving forward, you need to establish permanently the workforce that you have been funding on a non-permanent basis. And that's what this resource relates to. It gets our caseloads to a safe level, and through caseloads being at a safe level, we will be able to do the quality of work, which enables us to safely reduce those who come into statutory services, either onto the Child Protection Register or becoming care experience. So overall, more cost effective, and that was the plan which you approved as a council back in September.
Thank you. Councillor Ross Penhale-Thomas, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So again, on SSW2 and the Directorate Vacancy Management Fact there, just reading some of the impact statement there, recruitment has been an issue across council in recent years. I think that's something of an understatement with regards to social services, which has been part.
Councillor Penhale-Thomas, can I just stop you 1 second? I think you're on Appendix B and we're on Appendix A. I know it's very confusing. No, it's confusing because they've got SSW 1, 2 and 3, 4 here in Appendix A and then repeated again.
Okay.
So
happy to be called in at that point, Chair. Thanks.
Hold your powder for a second. And Councillor Williams, I did see your hand come up and go down. I don't know if you did have a question on this one or if you're also waiting.
Not as yet. I will have one.
Lovely, thank you. In that case, if there's no other from the members on this one, I just want to say, obviously we've got the Public Institute of Public Care report come through, and that's recommendations rather than requirements, and they're two very different languages. So I know that we are good as an authority, certainly in social services, in looking at what we need to do, where we have to do things, and where that line is. And I just wondered if we had taken that into account, that it's recommendations. And I absolutely hear what you've just said about CIW, the instances we've had, and the holes that we are trying to fill here under a recommended report. But I just wondered if we'd looked at different ways to do that as well, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so the analysis informed what we took the analysis from the Institute of Public Care, and we put that into a 3-year strategic plan that we developed ourselves. So we didn't take every line of the analysis. We used it to inform. Where we used the external experts was to look at evidence of best practice from across the UK, to look at what is published in terms of the research base around what you need to run an effective and safe social services authority. The requirements are from Care Inspectorate Wales. So they didn't recommend to us, they required to us in formal correspondence to myself and the Chief Executive to put in place sustained and rapid improvements. And as I say, we did the rapid, but we did the rapid in a way that was unsustainable from a financial and a service perspective. If we now say we can't afford to do the sustained, we are back to where we were in terms of Care Inspectorate Wales concerns about whether we can run an effective and safe local safeguarding authority. And that is a requirement. It is as simple as that. And I guess that's why in the budget principles that Cabinet are proposing, safeguarding the vulnerable, not everybody, but safeguarding is the highest priority in that list of priorities from a budget perspective, because that's the core business in terms of the authority. But this is not a recommendation that's nice to have in best times. This is an absolute requirement from our inspectors and an absolute requirement to keep children safe, well and alive.
Thank you. And on that note, because obviously £2 million is quite a significant pressure on that budget, obviously it's going to be an ongoing requirement. So is this going to be an ongoing budget requirement in future years as well? I mean, I know we haven't got a crystal ball and I know we can't say, but are we likely to see this requirement drop as we see, because obviously we've spoken in Scrutiny previously about we've had a spike of cases through the front door, which you always do when there's a CIW report. We know that. And it's likely to tail off? Are we likely to see a drop in this for future years, or is it likely to stay the same for the next year or a couple of years? I don't know if yourself or Caris would like to look at that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason we had the external analysis, is to inform us on that. So we were very high profile local authority, weren't we, from a children's services perspective in the media. You would expect there to be a spike in referrals. So some of what the independent analysis did was to look at local authorities where they had similarly high profile media coverage regarding safeguarding for a period of time, and how long did they need therefore to operate at that level, and that's what's informed the need for this to be ongoing. If I just highlight local authority elsewhere in Wales, which we drew on quite heavily as a case study, which didn't have the same high media profile but had difficult inspection reports for a period of time. They invested in the same way in the workforce. What they've seen is a reduction in the child protection registrations and the number of care experienced children, but they've never disinvested in the workforce element, because by keeping caseloads at a safe level, and as I say, that authority, their caseloads are considerably lower than what we're proposing here, but by keeping caseloads at a safe level, you're able to reduce the number of statutory interventions over time, not tomorrow, not next week, but over time, and that's why it's a 3-year plan, and that is ultimately more cost effective and delivers better outcomes, because by far the highest element of spend that we've got, which I've already highlighted, is around children's placements, which can cost around £500,000 a year for one placement for a care experienced child if they're in an independent residential. But yes, it's certainly that all the analysis showed us that this needed to be an ongoing and sustained investment.
Thank you. Caris, did you want to come in on that? And Councillor Lewis, I am coming to you in a second.
I think the one thing I would add to that, Chair, and Claire has mentioned it, is the proposal in this budget is to fund that staffing level going forward. There is a cost pressure there again that Claire has mentioned, which is about those expensive placements, which are right at the end of the sort of piece of work that social services do in helping to support children and young people. Therefore, the long-term projection is that spend should come down, as long as the staffing levels are maintained within the teams and they're able to support and assist people earlier. We should not get to the point where we have to purchase these out-of-county placements. So that's the pressure that hasn't been funded, because actually that should drop. It won't drop in 1 year, and I accept that, but it should drop over the next couple of years once the staffing levels are fixed. Cases for staff remain at a lower level. They can work with these children and young people, and we should then be seeing that out-of-county placement spend drop in the next year, 2 years.
Thank you. I'm just going to bookmark what you've said there, because we have got questions further down the agenda on these items. So I'll come back to that as well. Councillor Lewis, thank you.
Yeah, I think mine has been partially answered, actually. It's about the 3-year sustainability plan that we agreed on last September. Sorry to be impatient, but are we seeing an impact on it?
Yeah, we're seeing a good impact, Councillor Lewis, in terms of safe reduction in terms of the number of children on the child protection register. We're seeing some impact already in terms of reduction in the number of care and support cases open to us. Where it hasn't yet translated, and this is the difficult part from a budgetary perspective, is in terms of the number of care experienced children, and particularly those in the high cost placements. But as Caris has just described, because that's the end of that journey, the child's journey through children's social care, that would always be the last element to impact. So we're doing some modelling and doing quite a lot of work at the moment to try and advise you best about when you would see that impact in terms of care experience. But it is really pleasing to note, really, and there's a lot of quality assurance that goes around this, that we are safely and steadily reducing the register, and safely now starting to reduce the number of those cases open to us on a care and support basis.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, just to add, really, Councillor Lewis, what we're also now seeing is smaller caseloads for our staff as well. So our ability to work with children and families, that more early intervention, that more preventative kind of way is being seen. What we're now also seeing is improvements linked to recruitment and retention. So again, going back 18 months or so ago, lots of challenges around that, but where we are seeing some stability coming in our workforce because of the positive work that's now being done within our teams that's already been alluded to. We are seeing improvements around recruitment and retention, and in particular where we are seeing agency staff who've supported us converting into permanent roles as well within Bridgend. So there's little green shoots linked to our 3-year plan at this stage, but I think it's fair to say the points that have already been raised, this is a longer piece of work, certainly around our care experienced children's population and our outer county independent residential placements as well then.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you, Councillor Lewis?
Yes, thank you very much. That's good news. Thank you.
And just before I come back to you, Councillor Hughes, to check your content, can I just ask you about the fact that agency staff are converting? Because that is really good news. But equally as well, can I ask you how you are doing that? Because I know it's probably quite a complex answer, but it does impact on other directorates as well. So I'd be interested to hear what you're doing there specifically to encourage that.
So currently lots of discussions with our agencies, specifically in terms of the rates of pay and the memorandum of cooperation that was developed across Wales really in terms of how we work with our agency staff. But I think from a Bridgend perspective, what we are seeing is the implementation of signs of safety as a framework, the supervision and the support that's being offered within teams, the reduction in caseloads, the support that's been offered through the council as well in terms of the training that's available, I think is part of the reason that agency workers are wanting to convert as well. We are not seeing as much kind of movement between local authorities with agency staff that maybe happened again 18 months or so ago when rates of pay were slightly different. So I think what we are now seeing is staff are ultimately going, I'm in a local authority in a safeguarding team where I am supported to undertake meaningful and effective work with children and families that makes a difference, and therefore I want to remain within this environment as well. Then, so we see that as lots of the benefits. It's about that kind of ongoing support, that supervision, that training, and that low caseload, as Claire's already alluded to.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Councillor Hughes, are you content with your question being answered? I think you may be. Are you tussling with your...
Yeah, sorry,
no,
yeah,
no,
that's fine, thank you.
Lovely, grand. So moving on, SSW 3, and I would like to bring in Councillor Watham on this one, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question relates to increased cost of home care for adults with learning disabilities. What has changed here? Why are more hours being covered, and what complexities in need have changed since last year to justify this uplift in budget?
Who would like to take that?
So it's talking about the budget pressures now, is it? In terms
Yes.
of, yeah, okay. So in terms of this, I think the report that we brought to Scrutiny a little while ago actually identified quite a number of complexities and then gave you the full details really of what we're doing in terms of trying to manage that then. So as part of our presentation on that day, we did talk about the things that had changed in the system as part of that. Some of it is that we have got more numbers coming into the system. Some of it is that the consequence of a number of things that we brought out as part of that Alder review that we did in terms of that. I think that it's not just one thing. It's complicated really in terms of the legislation that we talked in as part of that report. We talked about the legislation around deprivations of liberty and the additional work that we need to do around that. We talked about the impact of COVID that had on individuals and the long-term effect of the isolation and people choosing not to go back to perhaps things that they did previously and having to stay at home. We talked about the piece of work that we're doing around right sizing and how we're going to do that, and then the programme gave you some full details of all of those individual things that we're doing. What we are seeing is that the increasing complexity is that people are presenting with not just one condition. They're presenting with learning disabilities, right alongside people with mental health needs at the same time. And there's a whole array of things that we're now dealing with that we weren't dealing with 10 years ago, say, for instance, with individuals.
Okay, I mean, I think the question is, though, more what has changed in the last 12 months to justify this uplift. Because it's not 10 years ago we're talking about, it's now and recent, isn't it? So has there been a recent change that has impacted on this budget line, please?
There hasn't been a significant change in the numbers of people with learning disabilities that are in our services. What we have got is an accumulation of, we've been out to tender in the last 2 years, and it's the impact of that. There's the impact of things like the real living wage, and so there's the financial elements, as well as the increase of packages of care that we're delivering for individuals.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you, Councillor Wathen?
Yeah, thank you for that. Obviously, it could relate to further questions, but at the moment, thank you.
No worries. I think Claire wants to come in as well, so I'll bring you in.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Just to build on what Jackie said, the other sort of significant changes around the budget have been a loss of grant funding. So, you know, we every year in the learning disabilities budget will, you know, benefit from underspends in the housing support grant, because this relates to supported living. That fluctuates, and then we've also seen reductions in other grants that we get through from Welsh Government. So, for example, post-COVID, we got something called the Social Services Recovery Grant, which was significant investment. And going back 2 and a bit years ago, we had a massive underspend in the Directorate as a consequence of that. And that was paying for really a lot of the impact of the pandemic on people with learning disabilities. So Councillor Wathen's question, what's happened in the last year? In terms of people's lives, the big impact on people with learning disabilities was the pandemic. So that was when, you know, the usual way of supporting people changed quite fundamentally, because they couldn't access the community. They were spending more time in their supported living home, and that led to more costs associated with the support hours within the home environment. Lots of pressures on unpaid carers for individuals who are still living at home with family members and obviously caring for them over a period. So that stress and pressure comes through, but there was short-term funding through the recovery grant in a sense to mask those pressures. With that funding going, that's impacting then directly on the learning disabilities budget. Now, if you look at the learning disabilities budget overall, because there are a number of different lines in it, it is overspent by, I think, somewhere close to double the amount of the pressure. So what we've put forward as a directorate linked to the transformation plan, working very closely with finance colleagues, is an intention to reduce spend in learning disabilities by trying to get us back to where we were pre-pandemic in terms of right sizing and right pricing with providers, the support that individuals get, and trying to move away from some of the things that crept in with the pandemic. But we can't reduce the spend by the 4 million overspend. That's why the cost pressure is there at the £2 million level. So it's a combination of the changes that happened post-pandemic and the reduction in the grant funding that have led to the pressure.
Thank you. Just for clarity, being as we've got the finance colleagues here as well, obviously and I am putting you on the spot, I'm very sorry about this, but it is a budget meeting. We've obviously heard that we've lost grant funding from various forms and, you know, the COVID, etc. Do we have figures as to, just for the public to understand, as to how much funding we've lost via grant funding in total? Do we have that with us at the moment, or do we know? Is that possible? Is that okay, so that we can look at that, and just for context for the public as well? Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Just to be clear, Chair, is that for across social care?
I think just in the context of this item that we're talking about here, if that's okay, just so that we can see that balance there, if that's okay. But it's just because we know what the figures are for grant funding, and we have a rough idea, or at least I would expect my members to have a rough idea within this committee. But I do know that members of the public are interest in the budget and are scrutinising it themselves. So just for them to be able to look at that, because I think it's important. Thank you. Cheers. Right. Councillor Penhale-Thomas, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. You'll be pleased to know I am on the right appendix now. So just very quickly on SSW3 and SSW4, I mean, combined and as recurring budget pressures through the course of the medium-term financial strategy, that is, quite some pressure. So two quick questions on that. Is there the chance that the budget around those pressures could increase based on further additional demand in those two areas, SSW3 and SSW4? And secondly, I think this goes back to Councillor Gebby's points. This is very clearly not an issue that is unique to Bridgend. This will be an issue affecting all 22 local authorities. What's the recognition in Welsh Government that we really need an uplift, not just in the RSG, but particularly for social services, to meet these costs? Because I imagine you are meeting, Councillor Gebby, with all 21 of your colleagues covering social services who are discussing the really bleak and grave situation across these two areas. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Thomas. I think what I would say is I spent an hour and a half on the Senate floor yesterday in committee, and they told me they hadn't finished questioning me and they were going to send me some correspondence that they wanted me to answer. I would suggest, no, in fact, I know that all cabinet members for social services across Wales are stamping their feet significantly. I don't know any other way to put it any plainer, where we need to be really honest about the demands that we have. And I'm also aware that ADSS are making the same representations, as is the WLGA, in every forum. We did ask Welsh Government to stop doing the grant funding and to give us it all in our RSG, but they're not giving it to us in our RSG. We talk about social care, the real living wage. Well, a 3% uplift from Welsh Government this year doesn't even touch the side.
And as well yesterday, giving evidence to committee about the impact of next year's proposed budget. And the session I was in was a joint session between, actually it was social care and health, being asked questions about whether or not the money that's coming down in the settlement is actually going to support frontline services. And it sounds like we very much mirrored what Councillor Gebby said in her session, which was that the money can't get down to the front line just because, and it's not it can't get down, it's not sufficient. This quantum is not sufficient enough to meet the demand, the complexity and the increasing costs that we're having to fund through our external commissioning arrangements, really. So I think it was just to add that I think there's a lot of lobbying going back on the current budget back to Welsh Government about the impact that the settlement will have on services, and that whilst we're all absolutely support that we need to support vulnerable people, that we don't have the level of money that we need to do it in the way that maybe we'd want to do it.
Thank you. And can I admit that I'm completely sad, and I thought you were in the finance meeting, so I looked at the finance meeting first. So I have seen both. I am that sad, but it is very good to know that actually we do have officers and we have cabinet members that are going to the Senedd and are fighting the corner for this borough, which is good news for residents to hear. So Councillor Penhale-Thomas, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just very quickly, Chair. Aside from the fact that the Senedd appears to be in the place to be yesterday, and I've got some envy that that's where all the conversations are taking place. I'm sure I missed out on some interesting conversations. I think all three respondents mentioned commission services, so I'm going to try and do a link here, Chair. Members will probably be aware that in housing and homelessness support, for example, because of the reduction or the freeze in the housing support grant, commission services are actually at risk of being handed back on the 31st of March because they cannot be provided. Do we run the risk of that this financial year? And if not this financial year, potentially in future years as a result of budget reductions where commission services are potentially being handed back?
Who wants to take that first?
I'll give you one word, Councillor Thomas, first, and then I'll bring in Claire. Yes is my response. And I'm very clear about that. And I think the thing that we also need to note is all our community provisions are better placed to deliver services in some regard. Not always, but the majority of time. And I am really concerned about the impact that any budget cuts is going to have on our third sector provisions across the board, irrespective of whether that's in housing, in mental health, in supportive health provision, early, the whole works. And I am really concerned that charities and third sector provisions are going to crumble.
Thank you, because of course we are seeing that further on in the budget. Claire, can I bring you in, please?
Yeah, just to echo Councillor Gubby's yes. We do get packages of care handed back to us from providers at the moment because they struggle to retain and recruit staff on the salaries that they're able to offer to those staff. If we're not able to give uplift, because we had a 3.1% uplift from Welsh Government in terms of our settlement, over three, yeah, average 3.1 for Wales, to 3% for us here in Bridgend. So if we reflect that in the uplifts that we give to providers, they can't then honour the real living wage uplift, which is 7%. They can't reflect all the rest of the CPI and inflationary pressures in terms of how they run their businesses. And that will inevitably result in us taking more packages back as a local authority, maybe some providers ceasing to be able to operate, and that then results in more costs because it costs us more to provide these services as a local authority. And we've also been trying to focus our in-house services on the reablement, the independent way of supporting people to right-size care packages. It reduces our ability to do that, so care packages are bigger. So yes, this not just housing support providers, but all social care providers, unless they get an adequate uplift to pay their staff, we will inevitably see more work come back to us as a local authority, which will cost the authority more.
Content with that, or do you want a supplementary on that?
No, I would just say that I think that lays bare the gravity of the situation in front of us, Chair. Perhaps something that we can raise and remember at recommendation time. Cheers.
Absolutely, I've made the notes already. Thank you. Moving on, SSW4, Councillor Watham, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The question relates to new admissions. Where are they coming from? For example, are we seeing an influx from somewhere rather than from a general ageing population? How is this upturning need calculated? Where are the stats to support this assertion of an increase in new admissions?
Thank you. Who would like to take that? I think basically 1 million is a very round figure for this as well, isn't it? So how have we calculated to 1 million? Exactamundo. Thank you. I think Jackie's going to go.
I can't answer the question about the million calculation. I can answer the question about the numbers increasing. If I start with that.
That's fine. If you want to go for that, and then we can maybe split the question. I know it's quite a difficult one. So again, putting Gareth on the spot, sorry.
What we are seeing, so from our population needs assessment and from our population projections, that some of that detail is in the report really. What we are seeing is an increase in our older population across Bridgend, and our levels of prevalence of dementia is increasing across Bridgend, and the forecast is for it to grow even greater than it is. So what we have seen is an overall 8.7% increase in the number of older people that have been assessed through a social work and a health assessment requiring residential 24-hour care and nursing home care. In our older persons mental health services, we've seen a 16.4% increase in the number of people that need 24-hour care. So that is based on an assessment of their need. Predominantly, what happens is that we're supporting people. People come through our system through our front door, and our front door could be the hospital. In terms of that, they will go through a process of an assessment. Our aim always is to keep people independent, keep people at home. So we go through that process. With some people, there's an inevitability, depending on what's happening with those individuals, that they will come in and that they'll need 24-hour care. So, for instance, for older people, mental health services. So we had 165 placements in that area at in 2022. In December 2023, we had 192 people that were requiring that level of care. So that's where the numbers are that are linked to the budget pressure.
Thank you. Caris, can I bring you in?
The reason that pressure was put in there is because that particular area of service is one of the ones that's reporting a significant overspend in the current financial year. And it was really an acknowledgement that the service was not going to be able to pull back that level of overspend within the financial year, and that it's an ongoing pressure. So I can't tell you that it's based on X number of placements, Chair. I think it's just a figure that we've got acknowledging that they need additional funding in the base budget for that particular service area.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Watham?
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think as well, last year we saw a very quickly an overspend in social services budgets. So what assurances can we have from the Director of Services that this won't be the case again this year? Because obviously these pressures do amount, there's 4 pressures there, and they amount to a lot of money at 8 million. Are these figures pared to the bone? Are they genuinely pared to the bone as far as you can? And I mean, we've just discussed about the neat rounding up of the figures as well. Is that a case that's happening here? Is it a case that we are rounding up? Is there any movement in those figures at all? Not that anybody wants to see any cuts or self-cuts as well to this, but is there any movement there at all, please? Thank you.
In terms of assurance, now a good deal of these uplifts relate to pay and prices. So that's the inflationary uplifts, and you'll have had those conversations with other directors as well. So those go up, don't they, contractually from the 1st of April. So if you think about where we are as a directorate at the moment, which is over £12 million overspent, if you think that a proportion of this uplift is relating to pay and prices, then that tells you that there are underlying overspends in social services budget which are in excess of what this pressure will represent. So what it requires to manage the budget within the pressure is significant change in the way that things operate at the moment. So we've talked about the learning disabilities and the work that's ongoing there. You know, Jackie's put in place very robust arrangements in terms of adult services. That is going to still be incredibly challenging, and it does require people who are currently getting services to be getting that service in a different way or not be getting the service at all. So that relates to a lot of activity, doesn't it, in terms of social work. We've had some support through Invest to Save to do some of that work. In terms of the children's services workforce position, we're making good progress, as we've talked about, in terms of permanent recruitment, but we still have a lot of agency workers in our workforce, and it will take time to move from where we are to where we need to be with a permanently established structure. And necessarily that's not going to happen as at the 1st of April, because if we do get approval from council on this budget and the permission to start to recruit into those posts, people will have notice periods elsewhere, etc., and we can only safely step down the agency, and we are doing it, but when there's somebody else to take on those cases. Otherwise you could have unallocated cases in children's social care, which is a absolute requirement not to have that. We talked about, and Caris talked about the timescales in terms of the care experienced children and the placements. We've got, I think, 19, as we sit here, children in independent residential placements, which we fund as a local authority, and 3 operating without registration scenarios as we sit here today. It does fluctuate, so you know those figures might be different tomorrow, but it will obviously take time to get that budget back to where we are funded for, because we're not funded for that level of placements at those costs, because each one of those individual children could only move if there was a care plan which was endorsed by the court, the family court. You know, that is not even just within our gift. What we have to do, and what we are doing, is make sure that we're making less of those independent placements as we move forward. And obviously we've got our new in-house provision, which enables us to do that more detailed assessment in Meadows View. But then there's a lot of children already in those placements who you can't just move unless there is somewhere better and safer and endorsed by the family court for them to move to. So there will need to be a plan, particularly around the children's placements, and there will need to be significant change in the way that we operate across those other areas which are overspending in excess of where these budget pressures are coming through.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to come in on that? No? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Right, moving on then, we are going to go to page, forgive me, 59, and we're going to start on Appendix B for the budget reduction proposals. If you bear with me 1 second, because my page numbers are different, I'm working off a different one, which doesn't help, so my apologies. Right, SSW1, I don't know if any councillors want to come in on this. Councillor Williams, did you want to come in? No. Councillor Williams? Councillor Williams, sorry, you've just muted yourself. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, yeah, I'm actually on page 53. You sort of jumped a few pages there. I want to ask a question on ADFS 3. Is that possible?
Sorry, Councillor Williams. No, this, unfortunately, I know you didn't manage to make the pre-meeting, but we discussed very clearly that this has to be about social services for this meeting. So any questions need to be relating to social services, and I think that's going off track a little. So I'm just going to pull us back into SSW1, if that's okay. And
I don't think it's that far off the track, because I'm looking at the users. The home service would very often be people who social services would be interested in, you know.
Sorry, Councillor Williams, if I can just come back to you. If there are any questions that you have outside of the budget reductions and the Appendix A, then if you wish to send those questions to me, I can make representation in COSC for you.
Okay, right. So it's all about social services then, is it? That wasn't...
Yes, this is Social Services Committee, so yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's in there, so I thought I'd ask a question on it. Thanks.
No worries, thank you. So if there's no other questions on item 1, I will move to item 2, please. Thank you. I do have Councillor Joanne Llewellyn-Hopkins on for a question first, so I'll take that first if that's okay, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Penhale-Thomas, if that's all right. Thank you. Joanna? Councillor?
Hang on a sec. I got workmen working outside the house. I can't hear anything. I'll just move. Hang on a sec. Can you come back to me, please?
I can. I'll go to Councillor Penhale-Thomas then and come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's lovely. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Chair. So members familiar with the budget papers will know that this is SSW2. Sorry, is a budget reduction proposal that appears across all directorates, and I think it's a principle that was well outlined by the Chief Exec, I think, in November's council meeting regarding the vacancy freeze. I think it's probably a principle that we can all get behind, given the situation that we find ourselves in. However, social services and the wellbeing directorate, I think we're all in tune with the difficulties and the challenges that have been present, certainly over the last year, but probably many years before this. And I think it's quite an understatement in this directorate that their recruitment has been an issue. So I have 2 questions on this, really. So the first one, can you give us a flavour, please, of the posts that have been difficult to recruit to and that will be frozen in this coming financial year? And secondly, is it not the case that because of the difficulties and the specific challenges faced by this directorate, that special dispensation can be made in this directorate, whereby we can fill those posts in order to get us to a better position, perhaps in the next 2 or 3 years? Thanks.
Thank you. Who would like to take that first? Claire?
Yeah, so the criteria I've been using, Councillor Penhale-Thomas, about whether to sign off a post, and all posts that are advertised at the moment, we are still advertising posts, need to be signed off in our directorate by the heads of service with a very clear recommendation then to myself. the criteria I'm using, if we did not recruit to this post, would it actually cost us more money? So the obvious ones that we're continuing to advertise therefore are social workers, not all social workers, but social workers where we know that if we didn't fill that post, we would be paying out agency costs, and the agency costs can be as much as twice as much as somebody on the permanent payroll. So that's an obvious one. The other ones are around care workers, where we know that if we don't employ those care workers, it will cost us more money, because either that service will be commissioned out, or we can't build up the reablement service that we've talked about, which is absolutely critical to getting care packages right sized and people go on to have bigger care packages over a longer period of time. Everything else, unless there is an absolute safeguarding issue, then is something that we are not routinely advertising. Now, the vacancy factor that was calculated across the council was based on the fact that at any time the council is in a position where we've got, far in excess, I think, of 2% vacancies across the piece. So it wasn't based on actually additional action that we're now taking. It was based on the situation that has been the case for many, many years. And for those of us who've worked in other local authorities or other sectors, we're used to having to manage budgets with vacancy factors built in, because there's a natural delay, isn't there, when somebody leaves a post. Other than in safeguarding scenarios, you don't usually fill with agency, and there's a time lapse, isn't there, between advertising and getting somebody into post in a good employment market, let alone in an employment market which is as challenging as the one that we've been operating in. So that 2% should be achievable based on what's been the practice and the reality for many years in terms of filling vacancies.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so while nobody is content with anything in these budget proposals, am I right in thinking that you are as content as you can be in the wider context that this is a saving that can be made and is as okay as it can be? Thanks, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. Do we have Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins back with us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Basically, that's answered my question anyway.
I thought
the
it might.
Councillor Penel Thomas asked, so that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Cheers. We will move on then to SSW3 and Councillor Harrison, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Under this movement, we have risks here that people may not be able to have or have difficulty to pay, and also an increase in debt recovery if we are planning to cut jobs in finance and legal. Would this mean that the debt may be at risk of not being recovered? Also, is an increase in charges to the most vulnerable to generate an additional income, dare I say, not just a stealth tax on our most vulnerable who might really need this care and not just want it as a fancy add-on?
Who would like to take that?
I can certainly comment from the financial perspective. I think just to reassure members that people are means tested before we agree how much it is they should pay towards the cost of their care. So their finances are taken into account. So it's not necessarily a flat charge for everybody. They will be a means test for every individual who's in receipt of care, and they would be asked to pay according to that means testing, really. I think it's a relevant issue that you've raised around debt recovery. Certainly in relation to this client group, if we're in that position, we obviously do it carefully. We would take advice from social services with regards to whether or not that recovery would have a negative impact on somebody's well-being if we were to progress it. But you're right, there are savings in finance in relation to some of our staff. So it may mean that there might be a slight delay in the timelines between us being able to recover any debt that possibly accrue under this particular heading.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you there, Councillor Harrison?
Yes, thank you very much. It's good to hear that it's going to be means tested. I suppose if that had been in the report, the question might not have arisen. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins as well. I've got a supplementary question from yourself as well.
Yeah, it was to do with if you actually, if people actually cancel their care packages, this may lead to additional costs at a later date when they're more vulnerable. So what are we doing to mitigate that, please?
Who would like to take that?
So, I'm just going to make a comment, really. Thank you, and then I'll come back to you, Jackie. I think the comment that I would make is that it is up to each individual person as to what they want. It is their life. And I sound really sort of strict about that, but social services for years used to go in and do to people. If people make a decision that they do not want our assistance, unless there is a particular safeguarding risk, we should not be interfering. Everybody has the right to live how they want to live. It's not up to us necessarily to walk in and intervene. And I'm sure Jackie's going to come in now as well. But thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. And I do think that's quite a simplistic overview, isn't it? Because we do have complexities with cognitive functions, etc., etc. But I appreciate what you're saying. Jackie, would you like to come in?
Okay, so it's never one answer, is it, in terms of this? So Councillor Gebby is correct that if an individual that has capacity to make that decision makes that decision, we have people who make that decision that isn't linked to charging really in terms of meeting their care and support needs. What we would do have is that people will have allocated social workers if they've got to the stage where we're commissioning or trying to commission a care package for them. That social worker potentially will stay involved with that individual. We would risk assess the situation. If we did identify any safeguarding issues at that point, we would deal with that in our appropriate way. But we do have individuals that do stop care because of charges now. It's not a new thing, and it will continue. We do see people come back into the system quite quickly when that happens, and then we would go through the appropriate processes in terms of that.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins, on the mitigation aspect?
Yes, thank you.
Right, thank you. Lovely. Moving on, SSW4, and I have Councillor Alan Wathen for a question on this, please.
Sorry,
it's not a problem. Sorry, yes, did somebody want to come in?
Oh, can't hear anything, so
sorry,
mic was off there.
No, we're just having a bit of a discussion. Councillor Wathen isn't coming in on this, so I will pick it up. Obviously, this has a big budget attached to it of 3.3 million, with a relatively small cut in terms of what the budget is of 200,000. They say a review will take place, but again, how is this a budget line if it's to be reviewed? Because we've got it as a red rag status, but it's about wording. If we're at a review, has it either been reviewed already and it's in the budget, or how do we know how much the cut should be, and is this a robust budget line because it's still in review? Thank you.
So, Chair, I'll answer, and then Jackie might come in and supplement. The reason it's in red is because it's currently an overspent budget. So in order to make £200,000 worth of cashable savings, obviously the spend has got to reduce by more than that amount. In terms of the 200,000, these are savings that we are confident to make because they relate to staffing, workforce, etc., that can be managed in that way. The review is a bigger piece of work which may result in further savings for future years, but obviously we're not there yet and haven't put in place for the future years columns what those savings will be, because the piece of work needs to take place before we commit further savings, but that review has commenced. Is that enough, Jackie, or is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, what we're looking at in the current in our current provision really is opportunities to reduce spend, so particularly around our transport and hire of vehicles and a number of other things, as well as staffing opportunities if they present themselves in that way. So we're scrutinising everything in our current spending levels as well. So confident to achieve the 200 reduction in spend.
Thank you. And are you confident it's a robust line as well? Because obviously, if we've got future years that could be looked at, but we're waiting on the review, etc., do we feel that this is actually sufficient for this year? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it would be not robust if we put forward more this year because of the reasons that we said, you know, around the level of spend that needs to be reduced.
Thank you. Councillor Penhale-Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, on SSW4. So the first half of the paragraph, in terms of the impact, I think we can all agree with, and it sounds very positive. I just wondered, as we travelled further down the explanation, are we considering undertaking an impact assessment? I guess my worry is, if you consider the spectrum of people that may attend community hubs and services here, that we risk losing the people who have most benefit from attending these services. And if they are then not to attend those services, either because of rearranged transport or for whatever other reason, they end up coming into service provision, which is far more costly further down the line. So I wondered if that's been considered. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Kepi.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. I think what I would say is we overprescribed. We over-delivered all through the pandemic in relation to this particular cohort of individuals. I think the other thing that I would say is we put an awful lot of older people in LD provisions because we needed somewhere for them to go and we needed to ensure their safety. And it gave them a bit of reassurance throughout the pandemic when we had loads of cash washing around. So if we needed to over-provide, that's exactly what we were doing. But it was because we couldn't deliver services in another way. But we need to get back to pre-COVID, and we need to ensure that what we're delivering is right for the resident as well. There's also something about sweating our assets. If we can sweat our assets and utilise what we've got more effectively, that's better outcomes for everyone as well. And it's a cheaper provision. And it needs to be local. You know, it needs to be local to where you live. There's no point sending people to Brackliff from Kenbig Hill. That's a ridiculous set of circumstances. Not only is it wasteful in resource in transport, but actually that's not linking them in with their local community either. So I'm sure Jackie will want to contribute further and correct me if I've said anything that I shouldn't have said, but I truly believe in that. We just need to deliver our services so differently, and that's something that is well rehearsed in many committees with me. Thank you, Chair.
It is. Jackie, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you very much. It was just to give reassurance really about the impact on individuals. There would be nothing that would change for an individual unless it had been through an assessment process. So we would do an overall. So if we did a review of our day services, part of that, we do an impact assessment of the overall review. But then on an individual basis, there would be individual assessments that would be done, and nothing would happen unless that assessment had been done. I can give you reassurance about that.
Thank you. Councillor Penhale-Thomas, does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. I appreciate the transparency, actually. So in terms of Councillor Gebbie with the over prescription, I think I can see that to a certain extent. So what I'm getting from this is that following an assessment, people may actually be directed to services that are far more relevant for them and in a better setting. I guess my question would be thereafter, if after an assessment, they're no longer suitable for these sorts of services, will they be signposted elsewhere? Thanks.
Yes, Councillor Penhale-Thomas.
Thank you. If everyone's content, I will move on to SSW5 with direct payments. And it's just a very quick question that I've got on this. This in principle looks like good news, you know, investor save, that's a great way forward. So why is this on a yellow rag, please? Thank you.
I think it's an amber because, oh, yeah. No, sorry, I wasn't being pedantic. Yeah, it's on an amber because we've already done some of this work, and we're also trying to change practice so that these overpayments don't occur. So there's been a worker in one of Chris's teams who's who was fixed term and made a significant impact in this area. So the business case was there to establish that post and to continue to make that impact. But at the same time, we've also had a new direct payments policy, and we're looking at practice in relation to direct payments. So if we can get it right in terms of only paying the direct payment at the time that the support, the PA, if that's what it is available, then that prevents the overspend from occurring in the first place, and that would be preferable probably for the individual and for us. So that's why this one is amber.
That's fine. That's not a problem. And yes, you're right. It is amber. My apologies. Right. Moving on. SSW 6, please. And I have Councillor Waterman on this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question relates to 6 and 8, 9, 10 and 21 all appear to be the same budget line relating to contracts with ALO. The first question would be, why are these items in the red column? What conversations have we had with ALO about this? All these budget lines, when added together, make for 36% cuts to this budget line of 1.39 million. Whilst extended over a period of 4 years, all these items are in red. Does this mean the talks about restructuring with ALO aren't going well? Is that a risk? Is there a risk we won't be able to restructure this? And finally, what is the red element of these items covering?
Thank you. I don't know who wants to take that. Councillor Farr, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question as well. I think what we're doing at the moment, the contract is due for renewal. So we are proposing to renew that contract with Halo, which will give us time to remodel what we've got in the actual contract. So there is a review taking place. I'm going to pass on to Andrew, who can give you the inside information on all the other lines. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Andrew?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think the whole range of detail is being shown for the various proposals because we have a formal partnership and contract with Halo. I would say that partnership has been immensely positive since we commenced in 2012 and as some reassurance by using the processes we have within our agreement, we've already delivered significant savings, and we are using those same processes to identify what is possible and what the council may feel it wishes to have, because the council has kept many controls over features of the partnership agreement. So in 2012, when we started the partnership agreement, we'd have been paying in the region of £2.3 million per annum. I think this report will show that currently we are paying near 1.3, 1.4 per annum. And I think if we looked at SSW21, by working positively with a social enterprise and attracting other investments, we can guarantee a minimum of £200,000 saving from this partnership agreement next year. But I think beyond that, there are a range of these items that are shown individually, so people can tease out whether those specific things are understood, the impact of applying those things and requesting that they are taken forward, and obviously then communicating that through the appropriate processes, that those are changes that we would like Halo to progress with. But as assurance to Councillor Wathen, we have a hugely positive relationship. Halo have been fully involved in these discussions and helping to shape what might be possible and the calculations. But because of the way it's set up, they cannot make the decision to do those things in many instances without the council determining what it seeks from its investment.
Thank you. So I don't know whether it's for yourself or Councillor Farr to answer. I don't think we've covered in that, although you've covered it comprehensively, why this would be a red on the RAG.
At this stage...
What's the risk, basically?
Yeah, at this stage, there are shared risks and returns potentially. Some of these things are not guaranteed. I think there is merit in at least walking through them, just to spell out where the risks are and where they emerge, because it does vary proposal by proposal.
Right. I'm just wondering if we're being evasive about these risks and what they are because of commercial sensitivity. Is that the reason we're not really getting an answer here as to what these risks are?
I think there are certain things that would depend on whether the council wishes to extend the partnership agreement. Current partnership agreement will run until 2027. So I think we've shown a longer term opportunity to reduce beyond that by extending the partnership, but that, if that was the council's wish and decision, helps to unlock some of the other things that are being proposed at this stage. And I guess if you were an operator on the ground, knowing you were there for 3 years or 8 years, changes how you would plan to run your operation and manage your finances and what might be possible within that longer period of time rather than the shorter period of time.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Wathen?
Well, thank you for the reassurances. Obviously, the risk element is still there, and it does cause concern, and hopefully it won't. But thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Penhale-Thomas, can I bring you in?
Yeah, thanks very much. So it's around these budget proposals specifically relating to the Halo contract. I would concur with everything that Andrew has said in his opening statement around the partnership with Halo. I think it's been a fantastic partnership as far as I'm concerned. I'm a huge advocate of in-house services, but where we are forced for external reasons to commission services elsewhere, my second best bet is with a social enterprise, and that is Halo, because they reinvest into the business. So I would agree with that. As Councillor Wathen has mentioned, I am concerned about the risk, because if you read what the impact might be from these budget savings, in the wider scheme of things, obviously there is quite a bit of negativity potentially around the operating hours. But in terms of the wider scheme of the budget proposals in front of us today, there doesn't seem to be anything overtly negative. And I find that a little bit hard to believe, given the context of where we're at. Halo is a business in itself. Yes, it's a social enterprise. It's much smaller than, obviously, the county council, but it has its overhead costs. It's been through the cost of living crisis. It's been through the energy crisis. And I met with the partnership manager in my stake swimming pool over the last 12 months. You know, those costs have spiraled well out of control, and beyond their internal control as well. So if there is such a significant cut to the ongoing contract negotiations, I'm struggling to believe that Halo are able to sort of absorb that without a degree of negativity. So I'm wondering if you're able to touch on that, really. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to say we've been joined by the Cabinet Member for Finance as well as Councillor Farr. So I don't know who you feel would be more appropriate for your question to go to.
Anybody that would like to take a chat.
I don't know if you need a minute to catch up, Councillor Williams. If I come to Councillor Farr and then maybe to yourself. Lovely. Okay, Councillor Farr.
Thank you. Taking on the issue about the energy costs, Councillor Thomas, we are in negotiation with Halo to see if there's any way that the council could work with that, to take on that, because we would get VAT relief, whereas the charity doesn't. So it is about working jointly with them. And like Andrew said, we are working very closely with Halo, because obviously we don't want to lose the good partnership we've got with them. So on that energy cost, so there is work going on to bring Halo in line with the council policy in reducing energy costs. I'm not sure if it'd be helpful to go line by line rather than as an overall, because they are cuts, as Andrew mentioned, in different areas, rather than as, because this line 6, 8, 9, 10, 21, 10. So there's quite a lot of proposal for Halo.
Yes, we are. Sorry, we are going to come in line by line. Sorry, Councillor Thomas.
I'm so sorry, we're talking over each other. You were the chair, you carry on.
That's very kind. No, we are going to come down to some other questions line by line as well. So this is just the brief overview at the start, but I appreciate that. Sorry, Councillor Penhale Thomas, you want to come in?
I was just saying, I thought it was helpful for me and Pops for other committee members and those responding. If we looked at it all together at first, because overall it's difficult to see it as single cuts when actually, you know, this potentially is a reduction in contract negotiations. We are essentially telling Halo that we don't have the envelope to give you that we've previously had to give you. Can you continue to carry out the services in the way that you have done, and if not, what are going to be the impacts? And that's what I'm trying to tease out in a very convoluted way. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Councillor Williams, can I bring you in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and forgive me for being late. And I did just come in at the end, I suppose, of this piece. But I would like to agree, first of all, with Councillor Penhale Thomas. Now, our relationship with Halo has been very, very positive. And I think that the way that they have managed our leisure services has been a real credit to them, and it's been a benefit to the residents of the county borough. And we want to ensure that relationship continues, and that is the purpose, I suppose, of that renegotiation of an extension, which then we can reduce the management fee going forward. I suppose, having said that, obviously, you know, the idea that we can make reductions without impact is just not feasible, is it? You know, like, I mean, but we are committed to working with them to provide the best possible service that we can within the resources that's available to us. And you know, we hope that we can work through these issues. And you know, unfortunately, I don't think it's the prediction going forward then isn't very positive either. So it's about getting that right and getting that balance right between, you know, what we got and what we can provide. So so thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you. Andrew, I'll bring you back in.
Yeah, as I've been suggesting, most of the things that are in here would not be read cold by Halo Leisure or our partnership with GLL. They will have been actively involved in reviewing in a mature fashion what might be feasible, recognising the position the council faces. I think there are some things in there that are more challenging than others, but the way that we've worked together, we've managed to reduce significantly, as I suggest, from 2012, whilst increasing income significantly. So I think in 2012, we may have been contributing £1 in 2 of operating costs, and that might be nearer 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 now. So, you know, pandemic has disrupted some of that. Things are rebuilding in a more positive manner. But the items that are in there, certainly the bigger ticket items of what can be saved next year, the 200 that is showing further down the list, you know, that is in our gift to do that, because we've worked together to attract external investment. That means we don't need the same amount of money to refurb buildings because other organisations have given it to Halo because of the social enterprise status, and we can do more of that. So that is positive. The potential to reduce through extension would fall out through certain current financial commitments and leasing costs falling off Halo's balance sheet, which is helpful to deliver that. So you're then down to a range of smaller items. I think, you know, I know you're going to want to go through them. The condition of the buildings was one of the big drivers for creating this partnership, and the lack of investment. We've really gone forward on that. You know, there is huge external investment beyond what we've contributed through, you know, the full repairing lease and the risk that sits with Halo. So council has a very good deal on that. But out of it all, there is the potential to look at the long list of whether we want as much decoration or we want as much minor refurb in some buildings. Now the times are a little bit tougher, so there's a shrewdness to some of the discussions that's gone on. Doesn't suggest it's all easy, but it suggests that these wouldn't be things the council would be imposing coldly on Halo. It's things that would have been identified as, in most instances, things that have good feasibility of delivering, but need fine-tuning and council's position. And there are a few others in the list that are a little bit more challenging to say that would guarantee you and efficiency.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you there, Councillor Penhill-Thomas?
Can I just say thank you to Andrew for his insight, which I think is really useful, especially the improvement in the return on investment over the timeline of the contract. A very quick question: the timeline now for contract negotiations. Can you update us on that? Where presumably then, if all goes well, these budget savings will be locked in future budget setting processes as green, presumably. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew.
I guess for most of the in-year proposals, we are live in terms of budget consultation and council consideration of budget. Halo are aware of all of these things potentially arriving during the next financial year. But as I've suggested earlier, there is a link in some instances to us being able to establish a position on extending the contract, because that helps to mobilise certain aspects. The one that I'm concerned about is perhaps the energy aspect, because previous attempts to do that have suggested it might need a contract extension to justify a VAT saving, where our irrecoverable VAT position is far better. And if you went to areas like Newport, they have a different alignment, which is more cost effective in how energy is funded and accounted for in these kinds of partnerships. And there is one other on the list that I probably need to flag about the level of subsidy for the most vulnerable using services. You know, if that is managed well, you know, that could say there is still good access to facilities that isn't prohibitive. If it's not managed well, you could see huge reductions in the most vulnerable using premises and a loss of income. But you're working in a partnership that does not want that and is trying to find that win-win position.
Thank you. And I think we have some questions further down on these items. So if that's fine for you, do you mind if we move on, Councillor Penhill-Thomas?
Sorry, it was my convoluted way, Chair, but can we just have an update on when contract negotiations are likely to have concluded, one way or the other, as to whether we continue? Thanks.
No worries. One very quick word answer, please. Do we know how long? Thank you, Andrew.
I think in terms... Sorry. There we are. In terms of contract extension, we take a report to CCMB that spells out the rationale and benefit next week. In terms of many of the other aspects that do not relate to that, you know, that will be in place for hopefully the beginning of the financial year.
Thank you. That's lovely. Grand. So moving on to SSW 9, I have Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins. I don't know if in part your question's been answered, but do you want to come in anyway? Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins? I think we've probably lost her off the line. So I'll move on to SSW 10. Councillor Watham had a question, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Williams, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's relates to page 61. It's a very brief question, really. The word review is used a lot in these items on page 61. Have we not already reviewed these items? Is this a robust proposed budget? Are items put forward still under review?
Councillor Watham, I think we may have the wrong question there. Apologies. I think the question that you were wanting to ask was relating to the Bowls Hall. No. Oh. Do you want to go on the Bowls Hall first, and then we'll go to the other one? No, that's fine. That's not a problem.
Yeah, in relation to the question, the Bowls Hall, 2% seems small as a percentage, but of 1.39 million, it's 30k. So that is a large cut to this budget overall for the operation of this venue. Is this operation sustainable with this cut? How would it impact on the well-being of our residents, mainly elderly, if the indoor bowls venue were to close as a result of this cut? What alternative venues are there in Bridgend Town area? Why hasn't the feasibility study been done already before offering this cut? How do we know if it's viable in terms of becoming part of a balanced and robust budget overall? Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to take that? I've got Councillor Farr and Claire, so I don't know who would like to go first. No worries, that's not a problem. Councillor Farr, and then I'll come to Claire.
Thank you, Chair. The bowls hall is only used for a short period of the year. So from April to October, they do bowling outside. So what we're exploring is, for those months when that hall is not being used, could that hall be used for something else? Could we utilize it, maybe turn it into a venue for children's play, for conferences, which would generate income for the council? So we're not looking to close the bowls. We're looking to see how can we utilize that massive space in those months that it's not being used. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think there's a bit of confusion over the question here. It wasn't about timings there, Councillor Farr. It was about the fact that there's £30,000 coming out of the budget as well, which, how is that going to impact on the actual bowls hall, and has any sort of feasibility study been done? But I don't know if you want to defer to Claire on this.
I'll defer to Claire or Andrew. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, just to say, this would be a saving from 25-26 onwards, so that's why we're a little bit more vague about exactly how it would be delivered, because the commitment in the narrative is to do the feasibility study for next year. As Councillor Farr said, there's all sorts of additional sort of potential uses for that space, which could be income generation, which is why you can see 10 plus 10 plus 10 in terms of future years, but we're only going to realise that income if we do the feasibility study, which includes working with the Bowls Club about their future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Andrew, did you want to come in as well?
I'm frightened to push buttons now, but yeah, I think it's one of the largest footprints of space that we have in the county borough that has a council attachment to it. It's clearly used for elections, and we have improved the viability of that space by attracting external money, building the wellbeing hub, employability being hosted, carer services and so on in there. But as you identify, the report is suggesting in the long game there may be the potential for looking at something more standalone that meets the needs of bowls, but that isn't sort of what this proposal is about. From April to October, this is what would an alternative income generating opportunity look like that makes the venue more viable, that reduces the subsidy to that big footprint. And that is something that Halo have some ideas on, but we may have ideas of our own also, of things that might depressurise our own estate or our own services. So it needs a bringing together.
Okay, thank you. So really it's a heads up for future years that this is happening. Does that answer the question for you?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was under the impression, mind, that the people who use this venue, the bowls people, also use the venue as a social club, a get together after bowls and things like that. So that is a consideration taken forward if that is in fact what happens.
Only during the season, Councillor Watson, they have a club. We relocated their room to a smaller club room overlooking the outdoor rinks, which, as we're aware, is looking at community asset transfer type processes and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Williams, can I bring you in, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Now, Councillor Farr has partially answered the question that I was going to ask, which is what other purposes are envisaged for the use of the Bowls Hall? I would ask a little bit more than that. Is it worth engaging consultants to actually find a use, business use for the premises when it's not occupied. I'm not talking about permanent additions there, you know, the permanent structure there, but people who could use the hall, which seems to stand empty for quite long periods of time. That's really what I was asking, just to get the value of the money, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's a good question. Councillor Farr, can I bring you in?
Yes, of course. And I think that's what that's what we're exploring, Councillor Williams. How can we utilise that space to bring some money in? And I guess the feasibility study would look at that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring Andrew in, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Williams.
Okay.
Yeah, just for clarity, we have submitted an application to the Council's Feasibility Fund to look at this. It isn't underused at the, it isn't as well used as it could be, but it does have use currently. So we mentioned elections, but the job fairs and conferencing happens to a smaller extent. Things like the holiday programs are operated, but I think it could benefit from a more defined purpose with more focus on commerciality to it, but that might require some development and some small investment to generate that, and that's really what this proposal is founded on.
Lovely, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Williams?
Yes, more or less. I was thinking perhaps other clubs, if we publicise that this venue is available, you know, so that we can, where they just come in, bring all their things, and then have a meeting, and then take it all away again for the next user, you know, which I think would be a good way of perhaps cutting the, you know, or lowering the costs of running the place, you know. But thanks, yes, it's more or less answered, thanks.
Oh, Chair, you're on mute.
My apologies, I pressed the wrong way. With that, I'm going to move on to SSW 11 and bring in Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins, please. Thank you. Is that a legacy hand as well, Councillor Thomas? Sorry, Andrew Thomas. Sorry, thank you. Do we have Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins yet? Yep.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I've got noise behind me. I've got workmen outside my house. I can't hear anything. I've asked Councillor Caparos to ask my questions, please, because I can't hear anything, literally. I'm sitting on the bathroom floor at the minute.
That's fine.
Sorry, they're drilling and digging and pulling things out, and I have no control over it. Sorry.
It's fine. Councillor Caparos, are you content to ask all the questions for Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins?
Yes, that's no problem. My first one I have offers for SSW 12.
Thank you, Councillor Caparos. Thank you.
Sorry, which one is it for?
SSW 12.
I've got you down for SSW 11.
It's relating to the cost of community centres. If the funding is cut, have we got any idea, you know, what the impact is going to be?
No, I've got you down for SSW 11, so it's fine. I'll take SSW 11 for Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins, and I'll bring you in for 12 if that's okay. So on 11, I think it's just clarity is needed as to whether there is an intention to reduce or totally do away with this concession, and it's not quite clear. There's an overall budget of 1.7 million for this item, of which there is a proposed cut of 1% at 15k. So in terms of finance there, that's minuscule really, isn't it? But it's likely to have a massive impact on some of the most vulnerable in our society and our borough. So as such, that means if 15k is cut, it would hardly see the needle move on this budget. What are other items in this budget line? Because we've got 1.27 million there, but no indication of what else is there. Are there other items that, you know, may take precedence over this one? I don't think there's any sort of indication there as to how we've come to this singular decision on 15k for this particular item. So I don't know if we can have some clarity, please. Who would like to take that?
I think that budget is really in relation to the whole of the partnership. So the concessions will be a much smaller part of that. What I can't tell you is the percentage of the concessions element of that budget. Andrew, do you know?
Sorry, this would relate to income that Halo were generating and where they felt they could offer the council an efficiency from the management fee. I think the council has always protected the more vulnerable, but there is a question, and I think what you're suggesting is, would the sensitivity of the price be tested, which is, I think, where we go on this, in moving closer towards cost recovery. I think full removal of all subsidy will remove 10% of usage of leisure centres and income and what would go with it. So I think there's an attempt to try and reduce the level of subsidy for those people that are currently getting it, and to review the concessionary policies to be more affordable for the authority. But Halo would suggest there is a risk to this where it could go as backward as it can forward in terms of users and income if you're targeting the more vulnerable groups. But Council has kept this since 2012 quite supported, just with a CPI rate of inflation on usage for targeted population groups per annum.
Sorry, I think perhaps it may be the way that I've asked this question. I'm a little bit confused by this. So are we saying that this 1.271 million is BCBC budget, or is it Alwyn budget? And so do we know what else is within that budget line? I presume we do, because we're only getting the headline there. And are there other items that might be within that budget that would be preferential to cut? Because I mean, 15 grand isn't a lot in the terms of 1.27 million. However, it is targeting some of the most vulnerable, but most in terms of vulnerability socially as well as economically. So I'm just wondering if there's other aspects of this budget line that could be looked at as well, and if that has been looked at, please. Thank you.
I think it's the same budget. You're going to start with 1399. So there is a question as to why it's showing as 1271. That's the management fee the council pays to Halo, which is probably about a quarter or a sixth of the overall operating costs.
No, sorry, I don't think they're the same budget line, are they? Because they are listed here as different. So I don't know if we can have some clarity on whether it's 1399 as per the other ones, because that seems to be what you're intimating there, or whether it is actually 1.27 and that's a separate budget line. So I don't know if one of our members of our finance team can clarify that, please.
Thank you, Chair. For the recording, Deborah Exton, Deputy Head of Finance. We'll take that back and have a look at it, because we're not sure if it's the income budgets across a number of settings. We don't think, we obviously don't manage the income budget for the Halo contract. That the income goes to Halo, so we wouldn't have the figure for that. So we think this is the income budget across our leisure settings, but we will check that and come back to you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Right. So in terms of that, I think that does answer that question, and we'll move on to SSW 12, and I'll come to Councillor Kaparos, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in the line there, it does highlight there's potential risks to curtailing some groups and some centres possibly having to close, and the issues then of what do we do with the buildings. Have you got any idea of the scale of the impact to community centres and how many are likely to be closing?
Who would like to take that? Anybody? Councillor Farr, thank you.
Thank you. Most of these centres are run by volunteers. They have a committee and is that if we withdrew our funding, which is not a lot that we give them, is that they may say, well, do you know what, we don't want to do this anymore. Here's the keys back to you. But then we do have lots of community centres in the borough that run by themselves, that they generate income, they generate funds, and the one I'm going to talk about is the deputy is part of in Pyle. Now that runs very, very efficiently. So I guess it's supporting, giving the volunteer committee support to self-run their centres. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I'm going to bring Andrew in, who can give you a bit more technical answer to that as well. Thank you.
Sorry, just 1 second. Do you need to declare an interest at all on this point now? You're okay.
Thank you, Chair. I don't need to declare an interest. This won't affect my community centre. We are self-funding and we receive no funding from the authority whatsoever. So no, thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Andrew, can I bring you in, please?
Yeah, so I guess this proposal identifies an inconsistency in what are certain council buildings where some of the historical stock of community centres are now operated by outside partners, including town and community councils, and there are a number that are left. Just for clarity, that would include 2 in the Caira area at Noddfa and Caira Development Trust, Coedra Ynys Sawdra Community Centre, up at Llangaina, the Richard Price Centre, Wiltrig Centre up in Blaengarw, and the Centre at Griffin Park, which are currently run by volunteers and voluntary management committees. The funding that we provide tends to support operating costs, but hasn't been increased for numbers of years. It's also meant to support compliance costs because they are our buildings where sort of the council's needs in terms of meeting statutory requirements are covered. Current climate seems to be tough for the third sector generally, but also people with premises. The impact of this has not been explored at this stage in terms of whether operators would choose to continue to run centres and whether this is an issue or not, but it's out there in the consultation and spread over 3 years.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, I believe you've got a supplementary question on this, so if you would like to come in on that now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very similar to what has already been discussed, but we can see it's a red rag. Isn't there a reason why the CAT facility couldn't be imposed on some of these premises?
Okay.
It would help reduce the budget.
I think CAT would have to be one of the routes that's explored if the authority is looking at reducing its support, but also its ongoing investment into assets. Then that kind of process would be required. Looking at the list of buildings, there's probably a range of standards of different buildings at this point as to whether you would wish to take them on without remedial works being done to them, and some of the buildings may be requiring a significant scale of investment to bring them to that position. But I would suggest processes like that will identify those that wish to go forward, but there may be others that feel they're unable to operate or progress a CAT process. We don't know.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gebby?
Thank you very much. This is really an opinion, Chair, but I just don't think it's worth sharing at this point. We keep talking about our volunteers like they're hanging off trees out there. During COVID, that was very true. I think we need to be careful with an over-reliance on volunteers who actually don't want to do it, but are so worried about not having a specific provision within their own community. And I think sometimes we put too many pressure. I think we need to be exceptionally careful that we don't do that to people. If somebody wants to volunteer, there's a process, there's an organisation, you can go to them, you can have a discussion, and I think we need to be very careful. So I agree with the CAT process, but I think we need to be careful on stating that we're going to rely on volunteers, because quite often, as we know from Nice Port Talbot, we had a lot of volunteers who were running all their community libraries. They've all since closed because the volunteers could not sustain it, and there is no support, and there is nothing around them to help them with that. So I think it's just a word of warning, Chair.
Yeah, and I think you're quite right there as well, because we've heard as well an awful lot about self-sufficiency within the community, etc., and it is about finding that balance, isn't it? Because you don't want to encroach on the community too much, because obviously social services is there to support the communities. So you're quite right, there is a delicate balance to be met there. So if you're quite content with that response, Councillor Harrison, yeah?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Can I just remind councillors who are members of the committee, please, to put your cameras on where you can, please, because we seem to be losing councillors left, right and centre. So if possible, please pop your cameras back on, please.
Sorry, Chair. Can I don't know what's going on. My camera is on, but all of a sudden I've disappeared from my screen. So I am sorry, but my camera is switched on. So there's obviously a problem has occurred with it somewhere. So I'm switched on. I can't do any more. Sorry, I am here.
Not a problem, because I know that some councillors are having technical issues. I've had messages about it. So, but just where you can, please. Just I'm mindful of the request of that we've had. So bear with me 1 second. Councillor Harrison and Councillor Watham, can I ask you to please turn your cameras on as well? Is that okay? Thank you. I know I was led to believe it was only online, but we're having requests from member services. So just as a courtesy, it's, one way or the other. Right, so moving on, I have Councillor Kaparos for SSW 13, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On SSW 13, it mentions employment support for those with disabilities. We all know losing a job is devastating for anyone, but it's particularly difficult for those with disabilities, not only to gain a job, but to maintain that employment. Can you explain what the nature is of that employment support? Is it directly employing people with disabilities, or is it some other service? And if it is direct, what are the scale of the impact on jobs, please?
Thank you. Who would like to take that, Claire?
So Councillor Kaparis, this relates to the would-be and BLEAF schemes, which Arwen run on behalf of the council for people with learning disabilities. The individuals who attend those schemes are actually trainees, not directly employed by Arwen Cultural Trust, and they get a lot of benefits from attending those schemes. Really good outcomes, and really supports their well-being. And if those services didn't exist, then they would be otherwise accessing social care services such as day services. There is an opportunity that we've identified in partnership with Arwen for would-be and BLEAF to work closer together. And over time, this could include the relocation of would-be into the BLEAF site at Bringarrow. That would involve some capital investment. So this hopefully would be a positive development, and also more cost effective, this savings. So one, hopefully that the impact assessment wouldn't be detrimental to those individuals who attend that supported employment as trainees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you, Councillor Kaparos?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on, SSW 14, and again I have Councillor Kaparos. You seem to be taking a lot of the weight now as well, that you've taken on your colleagues as well, but these are your questions, so if you'd like to go ahead.
That's no worries. So we've had instances in our community where the school is to share facilities with the community, even where this is publicly owned land, and we've had issues where the community has been denied access. If we are to rely on school facilities in order to support social services, what powers or measures are going to be put in place to ensure that you are granted the access and we can realise the potential savings?
Who would like to take that? Andrew?
Yeah, I'm not really sure if it's a question generally around schools or if it relates to the schools that we currently open up with agreements in place for usage by the community beyond the school days, school holidays, of which there are 4 to 5 specific sites. So,
do you want to offer some clarity around your question, Councillor Caparros?
Yes, no problem. Apologies, my laptop is having a few technical difficulties, so I hope it don't drop off. Yes, just really, do you have the necessary authority to be able to ensure those facilities will be available to you for the savings schemes that you have envisaged?
in regard to the sites that we are referring to here, they are the ones that would fall within the directorate, and we have partnership agreements in place that give us specific access, and obviously sharing of costs to support value for money for schools as well as community. So in short, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Gebby, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I can give you a live example at the minute. Part of my job advert that will go out next week, and I'm not going to declare any further because you're all very aware, and I'm sure that the head hasn't advised all his children yet, all his parents yet. There's an advert going out next week. Part of our spec for our job is ensuring that whoever applies and is appointed knows that it is a community school, and that is so that the resource can be accessed after hours. I think it's prudent to note that there is a finance implication for every school in that regard, because if you want the school open after hours and at weekends and you want access to sports pitches and things that are in schools, that means you have to pay for staff to be there. And that's sometimes an issue in older schools with older contracts. But there is a move going forward that we are looking for the development of our schools. They will all be community led. But that means that we need to fund them in the things that we are actually doing within the school. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. Just before I come back to you, Andrew, as well, I'm just going to note that I can see a number of our councillors have frozen on the screen. I think there's an IT issue going on at the moment because my computer screen as well is going blank and coming back up again. So I just to be aware, because obviously we've been asked to put cameras on, but that appears to be having implications as well. Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, just to reiterate what you just said, I've got lots of things going on here, and it did come up, it needs to restart. I've said not to restart it because obviously we're in the middle of a scrutiny, so perhaps, but I don't know if anybody else has got the same problem.
Yeah, I think there is an IT issue, so if perhaps our IT
I think everybody's is asking to restart at the same time. So.
Yes, exactly, that wouldn't be helpful. Right, okay. Andrew, can I bring you in, please?
Sorry, Chair, we
Sorry,
can't
hear anything.
Can't hear anything externally.
Sorry, would you like to start again with that, Andrew? Sorry.
I just start a lot again, I think. But yeah, just to give comfort to people, I say the specific facilities we reference in here are supporting in the region of 140,000 visits per annum from the community and from multiple groups, but also supporting a lot of our diverse programs or programs targeted at supporting disadvantage or disability, and having that place-based opportunity within a social care portfolio is helping us to develop better included opportunities. So,
thank you. Does that answer the question for you, Councillor Caparros?
Yes, thank you.
Lovely. I thought we'd lost you then. Just on that one, I've got two questions though. I can see that we've got 6% total reduction of the budget, but in the impact statement here, we've got right at the very end 10%. So I don't know which one is the correct figure on the percentages there. I don't know if we can offer some clarity. And also as well, why is it an amber status as well? What's the risk there, please? Who would like to take that? Andrew? Yep, thank you.
yeah, it relates to income generation and agreeing an increase in higher costs. It also identifies what pressures schools will be under financially, and the joint negotiation of what shared cost will look like in relation to income generation. But we believe that it is attainable. We just need to finalise the details with partners.
So, not a risk that wouldn't be attained. It would be attained, yes.
I think that one will be attained.
Especially with school budget cuts?
It'll be the same discussion, isn't it? If we're going to share what our overhead is going to look like for both school and ourselves.
Right, lovely, thank you. Councillor Penhale-Thomas, can I bring you in, please?
Yeah, Chair, my hand is up in eagerness and readiness for SSW 15 if you've finished on 14.
You telling us we've finished on 14?
No, I just wanted you to know that I was waiting in the wings.
No, I'm quite content. If everyone else is content, we will move on to 15. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. If I can group these just for an overarching question, 15 through to 20. You add up the proposals, which are a mix of green, amber and red. They come to near £160,000. Now, given the lengthy discussions we've had already today around early intervention and prevention and a move towards less reliance on council run and council funded services, are we not at risk here of robbing Peter to pay Paul and potentially having this to come and bite us on the backside in future years by people coming back in to potentially receive far more costly services from the council? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Who would like to take that? Oh, I've got Councillor Farr as well. I don't know if you want to defer to Councillor Farr first and then come in. Yep, okay, thank you.
I just want to say that I totally agree with you, Councillor Thomas. I think without the third sector, we would really struggle to deliver services. But, you know, it's a bit but there. We've got to identify the cuts to ensure we've got a balanced budget. But I totally agree with you. Without the third sector, would be lost. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gebby?
Thanks very much, Chair. I am really concerned about some of these cuts, not all of them. I wouldn't identify specific ones here because I don't think that would be fair. Our third sector saves us an awful lot of money. And one of the very first contributions I made today was about early intervention and prevention. The earlier we can deal with things, the less we have to intervene. And I think it's a decision for all of council. So when we say we're being transparent with some of this budget, we're bringing everything to you. Officers were asked to go away. They came up with these. These are in front of you. If you disagree with them, that's for you to make those representations. As the Cabinet Member for Social Services, I do not agree with some of these. I am exceptionally worried by some of these reductions. Care and repair, I will give you as an example, that will have a major impact on anybody coming out of hospital. So that's my political opinion. Officers are advising us, as you would imagine. However, I would hope and I would expect some consideration and some recommendations from this committee, Chair. Thanks very much.
No problem. Councillor Watham, I believe you had a question on SSW 15, but I don't know if that has clarified.
Yes, I did, Chair. All I was asking for is clarity to be sought whether or not it was withdrawal or reduction, and a question as to how much funding would be withdrawn.
Yeah, the narrative says reduction, and it'd be a total reduction of 38% of the budget.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you there?
Fine, thank you.
Councillor Hughes, I am going to come to you, but I just very quickly for clarity as well. There's at the bottom it says the grant to cruise is currently funded from the cost centre, so £20,000 reduction applicable. But then over on the indicative we've got 15,000. Can we have some clarity on that, please? Because it's a little bit confusing.
Yeah, so the grant to cruise is 5,000, and that's funded from that cost centre, so that would be another cut from the same cost centre.
Thank you. Yes, that makes sense when it's put in that context. Thank you. Right, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Obviously, Councillor Thomas pinched my question relating to items 16 to 20. Just regarding my concerns, it's only just to reiterate now what's already been said, really, is cutting all that budget to the third sector. Given what especially Councillor Gebby said earlier on in the meeting, and from my perspective in the Ogmore Valley, supporters in the community, you know, a number of residents access a dementia hub now that is run by the third sector, leads into people be able to access other community groups that they become aware of. And yes, I just think that really needs to be thought about, because it will have a huge impact, as everybody said. So just really wanted to reiterate that, really.
Thank you. And on that, I've got a further question on SSW 16, which I've got down as Councillor Llewellyn Hopkin, but I just wonder if Councillor Kaparos has her question.
Yes, I think quite a bit of it was just answered in the previous question, but particularly where people are having to access some is this something we're really looking to do and justify, or what mitigations will we have in place to make sure that people don't end up burning out and then we end up with the higher care need directly ourselves?
Claire, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I think this is one that the team are worried about, that the Children with Disabilities team, because these, you know, for relatively small investment, it makes a huge impact on the lives of parents and carers, and, you know, can really make the difference, particularly over sort of long summer periods, where the stress and strain on families, and it could be the difference, couldn't it, in some cases, between a family being able to continue their care and responsibilities, or asking the local authority to become more involved, and, you know, in extreme cases could lead to placements happening, which, and we know the costs of those. What we're doing, working very closely with Andrew and team to look at other funding sources that are coming through. There still is a budget there, so this is cutting the budget by 50%. How can we remodel what's already what we've got remaining in that budget? How can we draw on other funding sources that might be short term to mitigate the risks of that happening? But obviously any cut in this budget is a concern, and any alternative support to families, be it through a direct payment, be it through another service, will cost more.
I completely agree. I think if we could have a red plus on the RAG, I think that would fall into this category here, because it is a relatively small sum, but it does have a massive impact. Councillor Penhale-Thomas?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think Councillor Gebby has said it fairly and squarely, to be honest with you, followed by Claire. I share those concerns. History tells us that when we cut services like this, so we start making inroads into budgets, and for some of these, that's the end of presumably our partnership with some of these third sector organisations. They don't come back. I have some serious concerns about where people are to receive these services if we are no longer providing support to them, because I just obviously touching earlier on around housing and homelessness support and commissioned services and social services as well, contracts being handed back, charities are going to the wall because there is not enough funding available. And I really worry about the survival of these services thereafter. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Andrew, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it's just to clarify that this particular service is delivered by part of my service, and it is based on referrals from the social work teams. And I guess I wear other hats around sort of the place efficiency duty and children's entitlements to different things. And, you know, you haven't got huge numbers in play here, but they are the more complex, and they are people that need support due to medication and epilepsy and feeding and behavioural things. So whilst we've been growing other opportunities that are more integrated, or for other disability where people can engage with those, some people have got far more challenges. So there is the respite aspect, but there's also sort of the young person's aspect and their opportunity to connect into life and community also, albeit with support. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. If we're all content on that, I'll take us down to SSW 20, and I believe Councillor Watham has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think a lot of concerns have been raised which relates to section 20. My question would relate to hospital discharges there. If we cut this, what expected financial impact will this have on BCBC in terms of having to deal with the knock-on issues as a result of sustained stays in hospital? For example, will a sustained stay see our mental health residents deteriorate? And will they require support upon return to the community? Will that put pressure on our services as a result?
Who would like to take that? Jackie?
So I think the conversations have already been had really about the impact of the third sector, and particularly Councillor Gebby mentioned care and repair. In terms of people discharged from hospital, we know that the sooner that we can discharge people, the better for those, because people recover better at home. So that's our ethos, isn't it, across adult services, really. This particular element of money is used for a caseworker that works on the wards and would support people to be discharged that probably wouldn't come towards us. The reality is, I suppose, without that role in the hospital, people won't be discharged as quickly, and potentially they could slip into, being referred into social care for us to do an assessment of that process. That is a probability, yes.
Thank you. I'm just going to, Councillor Williams, I'm just going to call a very short recess for 5 minutes, if that's okay with everyone. I will come back to you after the recess immediately after, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Watham, to check your contentness. But if we could all be back by 35 minutes past. Thank you.